Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. So I got some great questions for today's show. As always, if you want your question answered, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Also, you can hit me up on Twitter at Aaron_Torres. You can always DM me as well to get to me. Let's get to some of the questions for today's show. First one, Brian Pasanick, I believe is a broadcaster in Alabama. Brian Pasanick says, who are your favorite all-time and current college sports broadcasters, national, regional, local, or school? Brian, great question. Incredible question. And what I would say is this. I'm not an announcer snob. I think there's these people on social media, I don't like that guy. I don't like this guy. This. I think the great ones are great for a reason, right? In the NFL, and we'll get to the college guys in a minute, like Al Michaels is awesome. There's no like Al Michaels take to have. He's really good. Whoever. Jim Nantz is really good. Troy Aikman obviously is not play-by-play, but he's really good. So I'm not a huge announcer snob, but it's a great question. Let me get to some of my favorites. First of all, I'm a little bit too young for Keith Jackson. Now, I do remember Keith Jackson. He was basically, for people who do not know, the younger audience, he was basically like the Chris Fowler of his era, called every big game. All the big games felt bigger with Keith Jackson. Unfortunately, I remember him, but it wasn't like the soundtrack of my generation. So Keith Jackson is there. What I would say is when it comes to college football, two guys come to mind. The first, Uncle Vern Lundquist, friend of the Aaron Torres Podcast. He put out a book about 3 years ago when this show first launched. I had Vern Lundquist on, one of my favorite all-time interviews for this show. You cannot be of a certain age and not love Vern Lundquist, okay? He was the voice of SEC on CBS. Obviously, you hear the music. Dun, 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 dun. Like, I was about to say the S word. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But that sends shivers down my spine. Vern and Gary, there was nothing bigger. Brad Nessler is great. But Vern was just Vern, right? He wasn't perfect. He messed up names. He got stuff wrong. But he was Vern. It was CBS. It was Saturday. There was nothing bigger. There was nothing more important. Vern Lundquist will always be at the top of that pyramid for me. And in terms of college football, the other guy is Brent Musburger. Listen, I know people try to be controversial. Brent Musburger was awesome. And like I said a minute ago with Keith Jackson, like I said with Vern Lundquist, when it was a big game, it just felt bigger when Brent Musburger was on the call. I'll say this. All these years later, I still wish he was calling games with Kirk Herbstreit. It's no disrespect to Chris Fowler. It doesn't feel as big with Chris Fowler as it did with Brent Musburger. I know he was calling some games with the Raiders. Apparently he's gone now. I don't know if he's just basically in retirement. Obviously he's doing some stuff with VSiN out in Vegas, but I miss Brent on the big calls. I would say those two, Vern and Brent, in terms of big-name broadcasters, it just feels big. Let me add this. Gus Johnson's awesome. There's this big counterculture, everybody loved Gus, so now you can't love Gus. No. Gus, Big Noon with Joel, feels big. And the great thing about Gus, he delivers in the big moments. Doesn't matter if it's a Michigan-Ohio State game, Ohio State-Penn State, Big 12, Red River rivalry. He's had a few of those with Joel Klatt now. I think Gus is awesome. I'm not going to be one of these guys that pretends that I don't like Gus. I love Gus. In terms of color commentators in college football, Joel Klatt's awesome. Now, Joel Klatt's a little bit of a friend. I actually had him on episode 3 of this podcast a million years ago when this first started. But I think he's great. And the thing about Joel, it's a lot like Herbie. He loves college football, and he only wants what's best for college football. I think he's great. I think he's awesome. He's prepared. I can tell you, I have been in meetings with Joel Klatt. There is no human being in any walk of life, in any business, who is more prepared than Joel Klatt. He takes it seriously. He preps for days and hours, and he puts his researchers to work. He puts his producers to work. When he goes on the air, it is with an unquestioned amount of prep and all that good stuff. So Joel Klatt, obviously Herbie speaks for itself. Really quickly in college basketball, a couple guys that stand out. I'll say say this. Fran Fraschilla, I think, is incredible. Fran Fraschilla is a guy that when he steps on the mic, I learn something new every single time that he calls a game. I would add this, another guy that I've been around. I haven't been in production meetings with him, but I can tell you this. Fran Fraschilla loves basketball. He just loves being in the gym. And more importantly, it's not just that he loves the sport of basketball. He loves people and he loves stories. And if you listen to him on those Big 12 broadcasts, you can hear. First time I met him, he was in 7th grade at a CYO. Like, Fran Fraschilla right now is in a gym somewhere. He loves basketball, so I love Fran Fraschilla. Locally, Joe D'Ambrosio, I'll give him a quick shout-out. He was the voice of UConn when I was a kid. Love Joe D. In terms of announcers I don't like, I'll just give you one. Jay Billis. I don't even know if Jay Billis likes college basketball anymore. All he does is complain. All he does is eat ice cream at Rupp Arena. All he does is whine about the refs. I'm out on Jay Billis. But in terms of the great announcers that I love, Vern, Brent, Gus. In terms of color commentators, Fran Fraschilla, Herbie, Joel Klatt, obviously Dick Vitale's an icon. I am out on Jay Billis.